everyone, my name is Helen. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about something that I always mention, but I have never really delved into in any detail, and that is hair texture, hair types, and the intersection between that and hair loss. Now, I always start here by saying hello, welcome to my channel, tell you a little bit about myself, which is that I am 44 years of age right now, and I tell you guys this to let you know that I have older-ish hair and I have some white hairs and my hair is kind of dry, etc. and so forth. And I also say that I've got type 2A, 2B hair. And someone actually said to me in one of my more recent videos, what is type 2A, 2B hair? What is that? And I realized like that for me is something that, because I'm so steeped in learning about hair and stuff like that, that is just the water that I'm swimming in. But I realize it's just not a common term for most people who don't really think about their hair texture very often, or maybe never, or they know what their hair texture is, but they've never actually looked at the curl chart, which we're gonna look at in a second. So that's what this video is about. And also, you know, if you know your curl type and you know the curly girl method and all that stuff, or you just have straight hair, you know, I do have some stuff. So just hang on, you might not be learning anything in this segment, but just hang in there. I'm gonna talk about how the curl types intersect with hair loss on an aesthetic sort of way in the latter half of this. So now let's have a look at the chart, shall we? Now, if you've ever have checked into your hair type, you've seen this chart a billion times. This is the sort of most common looking one that has gone around. Now, I've got this from the site curls.biz. I'll go ahead and link this up so that I'm giving this chart credit where credit is due. But what we've got here, what we'll see is that you've got your type 1 hair, and that is pretty much the straightest kind of hair you can have. Then you start getting into the waves, right? So the waves are basically the 2s. So you've got 2A, 2B, 2C, and you'll see that's not really a curl. It hasn't gone in a circle, like a kind of a spiral yet. They're just bends in the hair. And so I've got 2A, 2B, and the reason I say it's not because I'm not sure which one, is because I have both. Now, when you have wavy, curly hair, you can have a combination of any of these kinds. I mean, you can have as many as there. I've heard people say they have like 3 or 4 different types of hair. For me, I've got like sort of the 2A hair, it tends to be this hair here, and then underneath more, I've got the sort of the 2Bs, and I might even have a little bit of 2C in my hair, but not that much. So yeah, I say 2A, 2B, you know, you've got 3As. So the 3s are basically your curly hairs, and then your 4s are basically your coily hairs. So that's what you've got. So if your hair is like 6 straight, you're a 1, but everybody else is somewhere in the spectrum between the 2s to the 4s. I think that it's important to stress this at this point, being someone with, you know, just wavy hair, but I think it is important to say that all types of hair, all textures, all different levels of waviness, coiliness are beautiful. Straight hair is beautiful. It's all beautiful. There's no one that's better than the other or anything like that. What we are going to talk about though is just maybe some of the differences. Now, I can't speak in the most authoritative way about all the differences because I only have the hair that I have. I'm not a hairstylist. I don't style or help people with their different hair types at all in my real life. I just have my own hair, but there are some things that I have learned just from reading so much and learning so much and hearing from so many of you. So I'm going to share that with you in just a second. But I did want to also say we don't always know. I think maybe, especially if you sort of maybe have hair that's different from your family's hair, which I definitely do. I have much wavier hair than pretty much anybody else I can think of in my entire family. I don't think anybody has, maybe my brother has curlier hair than me, but we don't know, his hair is always short. But generally speaking, everybody has pretty straight hair in my family. So I have a different kind of hair, and sometimes in that kind of situation, you're not always that familiar with your hair, how to care for your hair. It might be a little different from other family members. I'm not going to take you down that path entirely because that's a whole other thing, you know. But sometimes I'm just saying you just don't know exactly what to call it growing up, and sometimes that can affect even where you go and get your hair cut. Like, it took me a long time, for instance, to realize that even with my wavy, non-curly hair, I just had so much hair that every time I would go to sort of a traditional, I guess you would call it, hairstylist, I was never getting a really good haircut. And when I switched over to a sort of curly specialist, I actually got much better haircuts because I had so much hair. So they really were good at taking out some of the hair so I didn't have such a puffy, poofy look. So they were really great at giving, and I don't have that issue now. You know, I have much thinner hair for all the reasons I discussed amply here on this channel. But, you know, it was a journey for me too, to learn the kind of hair that I have and how it maybe reacts and responds differently. Another example I will give you sort of from my sort of teens, you know, in my teens, straight hair was just like the thing, right? If you remember the Friends era and stuff like that, everybody had straight hair. They had like flat ironed hair. I never had that look because I have wavy hair, and I didn't love to brush my hair back then. Not because I was lazy to brush my hair. I mean, I'm sure some of it was that I was lazy to brush my hair, but if I didn't brush my hair as much, it sort of clumped together in a nicer looking way, and it looked more, to me, less puffy. Let's put it that way, less puffy. And when I would brush it, sure, I could get a nice straight part and stuff like that, but when I would brush it really thoroughly, I would have this big puffy hair. If you remember, Monica on Friends went on a Caribbean vacation and her hair puffed out to like hair there, and that's pretty much what my hair looked like too at that age, and it was not the thing. But consequently, my hair kind of did look messy if it wasn't brushed and I didn't have a nice straight part. And yeah, I kind of had messy looking hair, and that's just was me not really understanding how to look after my hair. I'm sure with the knowledge that I have now with like products and stuff like that, I could have tried different techniques, or maybe even just bought a flat iron if I really wanted that truly flat hair, but it just wasn't on my radar back then. Like, you have to remember, these times were very simple. It's not like it is now where we have Instagram, we have this, we have like all the information you had was passed to you either from your hairstylist, your mom, or a woman in your family, or like your friends. There just wasn't a lot of other there wasn't a lot of ways to gather information, tutorials, stuff like that. That didn't exist. It didn't exist. It was all word of mouth back then, pretty much. So yeah, we've come a long way since then. Thank goodness for that. Now here's a little fun fact for you, and probably the only thing I remember from 11th grade biology, which is that the gene for curly hair is actually the dominant gene. So the straight hair gene is actually the recessive. So, but does that mean then theoretically there are more curly haired people than straight hair? No, and this was actually the point that my biology teacher, who I hated, was trying to make, but I did actually remember that one point from him, which was that just because curly is a dominant hair gene doesn't mean more people in the world. Like, dominant genes don't necessarily mean there are more people with that type of gene, interestingly enough, for curly hair. And there are actually, as far as I know, just in terms of straight, like numbers of population, I think more people with straight hair than curly hair. I think there's straight is the largest amount, then wavy comes in like a pretty close second, and then third is like the curly and the coily hairs, as far as I know. Now, does that matter? Of course it matters in a way. You know, the way I think that it matters, and this is my opinion, is that there's just sometimes less knowledge about how to look after curly hair. There's definitely any curly girl, as they call themselves, any girl or woman or guy with curly hair will tell you that that is like, not every stylist knows how to cut curly hair. And if you have curly hair and you've had a bad haircut, you'll know exactly what I mean. There's just less knowledge about how to even look after curly hair, because when we look at commercials and stuff like that, you know, the Pantene commercials, the Head and Shoulders commercials of the world, usually people with straight hair or maybe slightly wavy hair, you often don't see curly hair. And you know, we need to see more of it, because it's a whole world. It's a whole, you know, I suspect that if you do have like legitimately quite curly or coily hair, you had to do all this sort of extra research that's just not available readily to you, right? It's like your own level of having to educate, or maybe you're lucky enough to have family members who have helped you, but you have to educate yourself. And if you have sort of straight hair or slightly wavy hair, you haven't had to do that sort of level of self-education along the way. So I'm just trying to help out a little bit with that. Again, this is just a launch pad. Like, I'm not an expert, obviously, in curly hair, you know, the 3s and the 4s. I'm not an expert at all. I know my own hair type pretty well. So yeah, what I do want to move on to though is talking about like hair texture and how it affects hair loss. And I'm of course not qualified to speak at all about the sort of medical side of things. I don't know if one type of hair is more prone to hair loss than another type. I suspect probably not when it comes to sort of like inherited conditions or like telogen effluvium. But again, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to just talk about the aesthetics, because I do have some experience that I feel I can share in that realm. I mean, there's a whole other level that I haven't spoken about here, which is hair porosity, which is a whole, you know, I'm not gonna get into that right now, but you know, again, if you have studied your hair texture really well, you probably have dug into this as well. I won't dig into that. There's a lot there. There's definitely a lot of good information on YouTube if you are curious. But basically, hair porosity is sort of, how do we describe this? It's kind of hard to describe. It's like how porous your hair is. And sometimes a test of that is like how much water does your hair absorb when you wash it. I could go on, and whether you need protein or not. I won't get into all of that now, but let's just talk about now hair texture types and what it means for hair loss. And also maybe I want to talk about like shampoos, okay? Because I think that this is maybe what you need to know the most right now if you have any kind of hair that's textured beyond straight. And that is, be careful what shampoos you use, because you already have dry hair, drier hair, not everybody, usually. You have drier hair when you have curly hair, right? Curly and curliest hair. Hair's already drier, and that's just a nature of the hair. Again, I won't get into the details about that, but the interesting thing is a lot of the shampoos that are geared toward hair loss are also geared toward making your hair fluffier or really cleansing the scalp a lot, to the point where they are drying. And that's what you need to know. So know that while someone else might say they love mane and tail, if you have wavy curly hair or already kind of dry hair or maybe even processed hair, you might find that really drying, and therefore you might decide that those shampoos don't work that well for you if they're drying. I will also say, just from personal experience, and I've tested all these shampoos here, you can check it out for yourself, that Mane and Tail was drying. That's a shampoo that people love for addressing hair loss issues. Nizoral is another one, really known to be drying. I didn't find it that drying, but known to be drying. Nioxin, I've tested that here as well, especially the ones that don't have a lot of moisturizing. Like I think I tested the 1 or the 2, I can't remember, but I got videos about all these different shampoos if you want to watch them and see me give them tests, thorough tests. All that to say, just watch out. If you're on the wavy, curly spectrum of things, you might just get a super dry effect from these, so keep that in mind. So the last thing I just want to talk about is sort of hair loss and how it differs when you have curly or wavy hair versus when you have straight hair. Just from my own experience, you know, I wear my hair kind of straight or a little bit wavy, but I was experimenting with the curly girl method, and the problem for me with the curly girl method is because for me, there's a big contrast between my hair color and my skin color. The way that the curly girl clump patterns work is like you have these little pieces and you don't have like a straight part the way that this is. I mean, you can give yourself a bit of a part, but generally you're not supposed to mess with your hair after you wash it. You just sort of encourage it to curl and sort of the curls sort of fall where they need to fall, kind of thing, right? But consequently, you have all these, like, your scalp shows a lot. That's what I'm trying to say. Like when you're doing one of the curly girl hair methods, your scalp shows a lot. So you can either just live with it, you may want to go in there with a bit of root spray, that works really well, or a little bit of fibers, but that's just something to know that when you have hair loss, sometimes it can exacerbate the way it looks if a lot of your scalp is showing, right? And so don't be surprised if you find that to be an issue. It can be. Alternately, when your hair is stick straight, sometimes it makes it, and if you don't have a lot of hair left because you've had a lot of hair loss, sometimes that doesn't look great either. And sometimes actually what you need when you have like type 1 hair is you actually need to put a bit of wave into your hair to give it some volume, to puff it up a bit. You can have that nice part, but if you have just some more action, the movement of the hair can kind of obscure the scalp. So I know that what I'm saying sounds a little contradictory, but basically to just really boil it down is when you have the clumps and the sort of wetter looking, moisture looking curls, sometimes the scalp shows through and it doesn't look so great. And consequently also when you go to the opposite direction and your hair is very straight, then sometimes you can also just see through to the scalp. So what I'm trying to say is anytime you can see through to the scalp's generally not the best look when you're struggling with hair loss and you feel like your scalp's already pretty visible. I think in those cases a sort of more, if possible, more brushed out wave or curl tends to look a bit better, but that's very out of style right now, right? We are not doing the whole brushed out thing, and I think that's something people don't realize. Like in the 70s, in the 80s, brushed out waves were huge. People brushed out those waves, but now they don't. They leave them very intact for that sort of beachy look, but that is kind of at odds aesthetically with trying to cover up your scalp. Okay, that was a lot. I packed a lot in. I hope that that helps. I know I've sort of touched on a whole bunch of new stuff here, but I hope that was just a very general springboard. Please, by all means, find people with your own type of hair texture. I definitely had to go down that path. You know, I cannot speak really well about 3C hair or even 1 hair because I don't have those type of hair types. So definitely find other YouTubers here or over on Instagram or wherever with a similar hair type and texture to yours and see what they do and see what's working for them. You know, see what products they like. I test things and I have a certain type of hair. That's why I always talk about it. Might not be for everybody. So there you go. I hope that was helpful. Please consider giving me a like and subscribing if this was of use to you, and we will see you soon.